Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be focusing on identifying and proving that congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent, or as you notice on your note sheet, Cpctc for short. We're going to show that mastery in class by scoring at least an 80% on the exit ticket. Hopefully you have that note sheet in front of you. If you don't, take out a separate sheet and we'll get you a fresh copy in class. Now, the big thing we want to talk about when we talk about congruent triangles: triangles with the same sides and the same angles. This means that all corresponding parts which includes both those sides and those angles, have to be congruent. Now, the big thing to keep in mind, we still have those 5 different ways to prove congruency: side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, and hypotenuse, leg. We also want to look at the congruency statements. If we're given that triangle ABC and D is congruent to DEF, that means that we have a valid congruency statement and it's going to match all the angles and all the sides. The big thing to keep in mind is if I look at A, it's in the first spot, and D is in the first spot. That's telling me if they're congruent, angle A is congruent to angle D. If I look at, and I apologize for hitting that. If I look at angle B, and E is in the middle, B is in the middle, that means angle E and angle B are the same. If I look at the end of it, we have C and we have F. Well, C is in the end, F's in the end, that means angle C is congruent to angle F. Now, when it comes to sides, if I look, AB, in this case, if I'm using the colors, A is in red and B is in green. So that means for my second statement, D is in red and E is in green, so they have to be congruent to each other. We're still using that congruency statement to judge what's the same. Now, Cpctc. It is the shorthand way to say congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So if I give you a congruency statement, that all corresponding parts are going to be congruent every time. So if we look at our congruency statement in number 1, we don't even have to draw the triangle out. If we look, J is in the first spot and P is in the first spot. So that means angle J is congruent to angle P. If we look at the second spot, K is in the second spot and Q is in the second spot. So that tells me angle K is congruent to angle Q. If we look at the end, L is at the end and R is at the end. So angle L is congruent to angle R. Now, for sides. We have 3 sides of a triangle, and if you need to draw it out to visualize it, you can. If I have side JK, well, J is in red and K is in green. So I'm going to follow that same pattern for my other statement. I'm going to go from red to green. So I'm going to go PQ. If I have side KL, K is in green, L is in blue. So I'm going to go green and blue on the other side. So it's going to be QR. My last side is JL. Well, J is in red and L is in blue. So if I go red to blue on the other side, it is PR. Now, when we say write another valid congruency statement, here's the thing that we have to keep in mind. If I start, and I'm going to use the colors that I used above, if I start with K on one side, I need to start with Q on the other. Those are the angles that are congruent to each other, so that's the side I'm going to start with. If I put J next, well, J was congruent to P, so P is going to come next. And then last but not least, we're going to have L and we're going to have R. Now, there are multiple ways to write the congruency statement, so if you worked ahead of the video and you wrote something different, that's fine as well. Just make sure In this case, your colors match up, or your congruent angles and congruent sides do. If we look at our second example, W is congruent to E, X is congruent to F, and Y is congruent to G. So, if I fill it in, I have angle Y congruent to angle G. I have angle X congruent to angle F. They're both in the same spot along the congruency statement. And angle W is congruent to angle E. Now, as far as the sides go, if I have WX, WX is congruent to EF. If I do XY, XY is congruent to FG. And if I do WY, WY is congruent to EG. Again, use colors if that's going to help you. If you're the type of student who needs to draw a picture, draw the triangle out. Now, another valid congruency statement. Well, if we look, I wrote it backwards, so now I can write Y, and I wrote G. If I have X next, I need to put F second, and then last but not least, I have W, and I have E. Again, multiple ways to do the same thing, but that's one of our correct answers. Now, if we look at number 3, it gives us not only the congruency statement, but it gives us a picture. So when it gives you the picture, start by labeling that picture. Here we have K in the first part and A in the first part there. So I'm going to mark K with one line and A with one line. I have P in second and Y in the second. So I'm going to mark 2 lines on Y, 2 lines on P. And last but not least, I have M and I have C. So I'm going to put 3 lines there. Now, if we label our sides, if I talk about KP, well, that's between the black and the green. So that's going to be congruent to AY. If I have PM, it's between the green and the blue. Well, I'm going to go between the green and the blue. That's CY. Last but not least, I have KM. That's going to be congruent to AC. So now we can label and answer it. KM, if I look at my diagram, has 3 lines on it. Well, so does AC. If I look at my congruency statement, K is in black, M is in blue. Well, if I go to my other one, A is in black, C is in blue. For CY, it has 2 lines, so I'm going to go to MP. PK is congruent to YA. Now, angle Y has 2 lines in green, so does angle P. Angle K has 1 line in black, so does angle A. Now, if I look, angle ACY, so if I go from A to C to Y, I'm going from the black to the blue to the green. So if I go on this side, from the black to the blue to the green, this is congruent to angle KMP. If we look at triangle MPK, again, we're just writing a different congruency statement. This is congruent to triangle CYA. And triangle YAC is congruent to triangle PKM. Make sure when you do these, you are careful about it. I know we've usually done alphabetical order, but when you're working on congruency statements, you need to make sure the congruent parts are all lining up with each other. If you flip to the back, we're going to do number 4 together. Now, if I look at my congruency statement, I'm going to start with S and B are the same, so I'm going to put a line in B, and I'm going to put a line in S. Oh, I don't want to cover that angle. If I look at T and F, I'm going to put 2 lines in both of those. And if I look at W and N, we're going to put 3 lines in there. Now, if you notice, angle N has a measure of 82 degrees. Well, if it's congruent to angle W, that means that is also 82 degrees. The red, or angle S, has a measure of 67. That means angle B, since it is red, is a measure of 67. They are congruent. When we talk WS, it's between the blue and the red. Well, WS is congruent to NB. So since WS is 9 centimeters, that makes BN also 9 centimeters. If I look at TS, that's 17 centimeters. That's the same thing as FB, or going from red to green, so that's also 17. In my second triangle, FN is 14, so on the other side, TW is going to be 14. Now, we can also find the missing angle, which will both be the same, 31 degrees. So now we can fill in our values. BN is 9 centimeters. TW is 14. BF is 17. W is the same as N, which makes it 82. B is the same as S, which makes it 67. And F is the same as T, but when we have two angles within a triangle, we can find the third. And in this case, it's going to be 31 degrees. Please make sure you bring these notes to class tomorrow with you. We're going to continue working on some of these and get to the more challenging ones. I look forward to seeing you then.